Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this pirate radio broadcast here on the streets of Lower Manhattan. We're gathered here across the street from the Metropolitan Correctional Center, where Fahad Hashmi is being held in solitary confinement. Some of you know about the case, however many do not. This is in large part because of media silence around the issue. We hear stories about the closing of Guantanamo. We hear very little about the pre-trial treatment of detainees here in the United States, and indeed here in New York, which is exactly why we're gathered here tonight. We're joined by Fahad's friends and family, special guests Wallace Shawn and Kathleen Chalfant, Mahina Movement. First up in the studio, we have Professor Jean Theo Harris, the endowed chair of the Women's Studies Department at Brooklyn College, professor of political science. Fahad went to school at Brooklyn College and was a student of Jean's. Professor Theo Harris, you recently wrote an article called No Guantanamos at Home. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and how it relates to Fahad's case?
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And I want us to take a moment to turn and look at Metropolitan Correctional Center and to see it and to mark that we are here in Lower Manhattan. We are here by the federal courthouses. We are here by Wall Street. We are here, in some sense, in the historic heart of New York City. And at this very same place, in many ways, cordoned off from our site, is a correctional facility that is engaging in many of the same tactics that we have been vocally protesting happening in Guantanamo or in Bagram or, in places around the world. And I think it is very sobering, and for me it was very sobering to think about this happening right here in New York City. Because many of us, as we raised our voices against Guantanamo, said, please bring the Guantanamo detainees here to the United States and get them into federal court. And then one of the things that we need to think about, and one of the reasons we are gathered here today, is the same devolution of the rule of law that allowed Guantanamo to happen, that allowed Bagram to happen, has been allowed here in the United States. As many of you know, Fahad Hashmi was my student many years ago, and he took a seminar with me where he wrote what is the equivalent of a senior thesis on the treatment of Muslim groups post 9/11. And so there is a special irony for me today, standing out here where he has been held for 2.5 years in solitary confinement. Nearly all of the medical and scholarly research on prolonged solitary confinement says that it is devastating. 2.5 years Fahad has been held before trial. And so we are gathered here today to sort of bear witness to that, to make that facility and that process visible, and to ask our colleagues, our friends, our family, and the media, the national media here in the United States, to turn its attention home. Yes, we absolutely have to be looking abroad, but we have to also be looking right here and raising our voices right here to this abridgment of human rights and due process that is happening right here in New York City. Hear, hear. Yeah. Some people say that they can hear in there. So, we wanted to do a little bit of call and response. The night before Martin Luther King died, as many of you know, he gave a speech in Memphis. They were going to protest in Memphis, even though there was a federal injunction against protesting. And he got up that night and he said, all we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. And so what I want you to do with me is to call and response. I will say all we say, and then I want you to say be true to what you said on paper. And I want to do this a couple of times. Okay? So, all we say to America is
be true to what you said on paper.
we say is,
be true to what we say on paper.
All we say is,
Be true to what you say on paper.
all we say to America is,
Be true to what you say on paper.
Thank you, Professor Theo Harris. So next up on WMCC Radio Free Fahad is Kathleen Chalfant, and she will be reading from the Special Administrative Measures, also known as SAMs. These dictate many of the conditions under which Fahad is being held.
This is what the professor was talking about. These are the conditions under which Fahad is being held here in the United States. Inmate communication prohibitions. The inmate is limited within USMS BOPDF's reason, efforts, and existing confinement conditions from having contact, including passing or receiving any oral, written, or recorded communications with any other inmate, visitor, attorney, or anyone else, except as outlined and allowed by this document that could reasonably, foreseeably result in the inmate communicating information, sending or receiving that could circumvent the SAM's intent of significantly limiting the inmate's ability to communicate, send, or receive information relating to criminal and or violent information. The inmate shall be limited within the USMS BOPDF's reasonable efforts and existing confinement conditions from communicating with any other inmate by making statements audible to other inmates or by sending notes to other inmates. USMS OP, DF, FBI are hereby authorized to place microphones in the hallways and elsewhere outside the inmate's cell to record any statements made by the inmate to other inmates or staff. The inmate shall be kept separated from other inmates as much as possible while in the cell block area. Non-legal mail is limited to only the inmate's immediate family, U.S. courts, federal judges, U.S. attorneys' offices, members of U.S. Congress, BOP, and other federal law enforcement entities. General correspondence with limitations. Correspondence is restricted to only immediate family members. Volume and frequency of outgoing general correspondence with immediately family members only may be limited to 3 pieces of paper, not larger than 8.5 by 11, double-sided once per calendar week to a single recipient at the discretion of the USMS BOPDF. The identity and family member relationship to the inmate will be confirmed. All non-legal mail will be copied, shall be copied, including the surface of the envelope, by the warden or his or her designee of the facility in which the inmate is housed. Forwarded, shall be forwarded in copy form to the location designated by the FBI, analyzed after government analysis and approval, if appropriate. The inmates, including outgoing non-legal mail, will be forwarded.
Thank you, Kathleen Chalfant. So as you hear, these are some very tedious measures under which Fahad is being held, and we'll be hearing more about the SAMs as the broadcast goes on. What would a radio broadcast be without news headlines? We'd like to bring up playwright, performer, essayist Wallace Shawn to read the news headlines from September 19th, 2009. Now wait, you might be thinking, why are we reading the headlines from September? It's October, right? Part of the conditions under which Fahad is being held dictate that he is not allowed to hear or read the news unless it is 30 days old or older, and even then is subject to censorship. So in accordance with the conditions of his imprisonment, we bring you the headlines from September 19th, 1 month ago today.
Oprah Mania invades Central Park. Oprah Winfrey waves a copy of her latest book club selection yesterday during a packed taping of her show in Central Park's Rumsey Field. Ichiro home run off Mo ruins AJ's gem. Ichiro Suzuki's 2-run home run in the bottom of the 9th off Mariano Rivera gave the Seattle Mariners a 3-2 come-from-behind victory over the Yankees last night in Seattle, wasting a brilliant effort by A.J. Burnett, who allowed just 1 run in 7 innings. 24 people on a hunger strike were encamped near the White House to protest the deaths in Iraq of at least 6 members of the People's Mujahideen of Iran, an exiled group committed to the overthrow of the Islamic Revolutionary Government in Tehran. It's that time of beer. 2 things you should know about Oktoberfest. First, it actually kicks off in September, today in fact. And second, the Steuben Parade up 5th Avenue starts at 11 a.m. before beer-soaked festivities take place in restaurants downtown. Dog poop for sale. Fertile minds devise doo-doo compost. Some upstate dog owners think they have a can-do plan to profitably compost the billions of pounds of pooch poop produced yearly in the U.S. At least 35 people were killed in a suicide car bomb attack in the Shiite village in northwest Pakistan, a top provincial official said. The village is in Kohat district, the site of past sectarian killings. Weird but true. An Ohio couple hit by a car at a dusky intersection had their own car stolen later that day while they were in the hospital. Asthmatic swimmer beats old record. A 50-year-old woman crushed the record for swimming against the current around Manhattan in 11 hours, 41 minutes, 5 seconds, which beats the old record of over 17 hours set in 1995 by a male swimmer, Kurt Rutford. If this year's Emmy telecast, hosted by Neil Patrick Harris, does not post significant gains over last year's audience of 12.3 million, more changes could be in the works. Tax Ghoul was grave robber. Ghoulish tax preparer was sentenced yesterday to 18 months for using the identities of dead people to scam $370,000 in refunds from the IRS. Adolphus Quay of Yonkers filed 180 phony returns, and he even cashed his last check after the IRS caught wind of the scheme. Justin Timberlake is beyond good manners. At Club Avenue the other night, a gorgeous girl said, "Justice Timberlake was rude to me. I was waiting for 20 minutes, and he was ushered right in. So I said, 'Hey, you can't skip the line,' and he said, 'Oh, I absolutely can.'" Timberlake's spokesperson had no comment. And that's the way it is, September 19, 2009.
Thank you, Wallace Shawn, for those most relevant and insightful news headlines from 1 month ago today. The censorship does not go one way here. Not only can Fahad not hear so much about what's going on in the outside world, we of course are not hearing about what is going on inside the building, the conditions under which he's being held, the proceedings in the courtroom. So to get a closer look at what is happening in these pre-trial hearings, we go live to a courtroom reenactment. All scenes are based on actual events. It's a little street theater piece we call Denied.
Good morning, gentlemen. How would you like to proceed, counsel?
Good morning, Your Honor. I'd like to address the conditions under which the defendant is being held.
Yes?
We request the detainee be allowed a radio while in solitary confinement.
Denied.
We request the detainee be allowed to exercise in the fresh air.
Denied.
To exercise with other prisoners.
Denied.
We request the detainee be allowed to take part in prayer with other prisoners.
Denied.
We request again that the detainee be allowed a radio to listen to music.
Denied.
We request the detainee be allowed to write letters.
1 letter a week, 3 pages only to, 1 member of his immediate family. But he can write as many letters as he likes to Congress.
Your Honor, we request the detainee be allowed photograph of his new nephew.
Well, baby okay, but no non-blood relatives.
We request the detainee be allowed to read the newspaper.
Granted.
But the news must be 30 days old. and is subject to censorship.
Extra,
by me.
extra. 750 billion to Wall Street. Mayor Bloomberg changes the law to extend term limits. Michael Jackson dies.
Your Honor, we request that the defendant be allowed to see the evidence that is against him.
Denied.
We request that we be allowed a contact visit to better prepare the defendant's case.
Denied.
Please, rest assured that any issue brought to our attention will be addressed in a timely fashion.
We request that...
Denied.
If the defendant has any issues with the conditions that he's being held under, they should be brought to the attention of the Bureau of Prisons, any employee, or the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Your Honor, we request that the defendant be allowed to see the case.
Denied. 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 Denied.
The totality of materials that Mr. Hashmi is alleged to have provided was to store ponchos, waterproof socks, and a raincoat. There's no allegation that Mr. Hashmi provided funds, helped transfer funds, that he transferred any weapons, fake IDs, and none of that. But simply that the cooperating witness stayed in his apartment for a few days in 2004, stored stuff, and that he let him use the phone.
Whatever.
Your Honor, we request that this man be given a fair
These measures
trial.
are administrative and not punitive and therefore constitutional. These measures are administrative and not punitive and therefore constitutional. These measures are administrative.
Amendment 6 of the U.S. Constitution. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense.
Your Honor.
Denied.
So, certainly not the only issue here, but the SAMs are largely responsible for preventing Fahad from having a fair trial. So, what can we do about that? One of the things we can do is to call on Attorney General Holder to not renew Fahad's SAMs, or Special Administrative Measures. They're up for renewal on October 29th. There are slips of paper, flyers going around in the audience right now with information on how you can email the Attorney General. Go to the website, educatorsforcivilliberties.org. Again, that's educatorsforcivilliberties.org for more information. We'd like to take this opportunity to invite Shawn Maher, one of Fahad's lawyers, up to the podium studio stage to tell us a little bit about how the case is proceeding.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Right now, trial is set for November 30th, right there in that building on the 12th floor. November 30th, within 2 months, we'll be seeing what the government's case is and testing it in a court of law with hopefully a jury of peers. This has been a long, long road for Fahad, for his family, some of whom are here, for his extended family throughout Flushing and New Jersey, for his family in Pakistan, and for concerned people around the world who have heard about the condition that Fahad has languished under. Maybe I am hopelessly and stupidly optimistic, but I think that there will be a day where this country will not lock people up in solitary confinement while they are presumed innocent. That they will not lock people up in solitary confinement for 2.5 years while they are presumed innocent. That while they are locked up in solitary confinement, they will not receive additional punishment because they try to speak through an iron door to talk to another inmate who is languishing in the same conditions. And then that conversation is picked up by an electronic monitor on the inside of the door and the outside of the door. Someday, I think that we will reach a place where we do not do that to U.S. citizens. We do not do that to foreign nationals. We do not do that to animals in the Bronx Zoo. Someday. Today, though, we are preparing to fight a trial. We are preparing to defend the Constitution. We are trying to reintegrate the Constitution, reconstitute it from shreds of paper on the ground into something meaningful that will have meaning to a jury that hears this evidence and that we hope then will say, not guilty. Fahad is not guilty. He should be released. So I ask you all to come back to these visuals, to see the websites that are on the net to learn more about the case, and to do what you can to support Fahad and his family. Thank you so much.
Again, Fahad's next trial is October 30th. I believe it starts at 10 a.m. The courtroom is public, so please be out there to support. We'd like to bring Wallace Shawn back up to the stage/studio to read from, I believe, his latest book of essays, or perhaps The Fever. Wallace Shawn.
Well, this is I'm going to read a scrap of a play I wrote called The Fever. This is a piece of poetry that is 7 or 8 steps removed from the horrible events that are taking place over there. But they do, the events are taking place because if you go back many steps, there are poor people suffering, and we in this country are the privileged people, and we are well aware that a lot of the people outside of the country don't accept the fact that they have very little and we have everything. We like to forget about it, but the thought keeps coming back that an awful lot of people don't really accept the way things are. So this induces a kind of paranoia. The destruction of the World Trade Center, also just a few blocks from here, added to the paranoia to an immeasurable degree, and emphasized the reality that yes, there are a lot of people who are not content with the status quo. And so there's a kind of hysteria that has taken place, fear leading to not merely defense against terrorism, but sadistic oppression of anybody who is thought to have ever met anybody who met anybody who met anybody who had hostile thoughts against us. So I'm going to read a page of my poetical play, which seems to have absolutely nothing to do with this, but it is, it's about us, actually. It's not about those who don't like us. And it's about someone who is remembering a birthday party that he attended recently. It's the birthday party in the fancy restaurant. Yes, there's the table with its sweet and pretty decorations. The fanciful centerpiece, pink and green, And there are all the women in bright red lipstick and the men in beautiful shirts and all the gifts. Outrageous, unexpected, funny gifts. And there are the waiters serving the salmon and pouring the wine, and there I am. I'm talking quietly with that small, pale woman in the red and blue dress about the love affair with the older man, the criminals, the psychiatrist, about that film that disturbed her and the actress, about the walks at night through the woods in the country, the insatiable appetite for violent sex, the suffering of the people who live in desperation in the crowded shelter across the street from the fancy restaurant. And as I talked with that woman in the red and blue dress, I thought I was a person who was thinking about a party, who had so many complicated feelings about it, who liked some aspects of the party, but not others, who liked some of the people, but not all of them, who liked the pink and green centerpiece, but didn't really like that red and blue dress. But no, I see it so clearly. I see myself with my little fork. I wasn't a person who was thinking about a party. I was a person who was at a party, who sat at the table, drank the wine, and ate the fish. And then, basically what the man is talking about, as you would realize if you saw the whole play, is an understanding that he is involved in the terrible things that are happening outside of the sphere of his own life, and we are actually the beneficiaries of the status quo, and the hysterical attempt to preserve the status quo at all costs is what is keeping Fahad Hashmi in prison, and the maniacal attempt to be sure that no one hurts us is behind the unspeakable rules that are being used to keep him in solitary confinement and prevent him from having contact with the outside world. Thank you.
Thank you, Wallace Shawn. This is our first broadcast, right? We've been calling it WMCC Radio Free Fahad. This idea to have a pirate radio broadcast here on the street to try to break through some of the media silence around this case, to try to galvanize people, and to really contribute to this movement that we just heard reference. So we have a couple of more elements to the show to bring you tonight. We'd like to bring up Fahad's brother, Faisal, to speak a little bit.
Just to reiterate, I'd like to thank you very much for coming and showing support for our brother's case. We came here in 1983 and we left martial law in Pakistan in 1983. I was 4 years old, Fahad was about 3 years old. 23 years later, the oppression that we ran away from, faced us here, engulfed us. My father worked for the city of New York for about 25 years. And my brother and I, we went through the elementary school system here in New York City, PS 20, then IS 237. Then my brother went on to high school, Robert F. Wagner, Stony Brook University, and then finally graduated from Brooklyn College. And he was an activist. Who was Fahad? He was one that, through his lessons at Brooklyn College in Gene's classes, he learned about the history of America, and he felt that, he could exercise his right of freedom of speech. And the sad lesson that the Muslim community has faced since 9/11 is not necessarily so if you are, Muslim and you talk about issues facing the Muslim community or war, which is what he did, that they will allow for it. It's actually what they say and what they're going to be using against him when his case is going to happen. They say, look, he demonstrated here. Look, he held this lecture here. And, it's a sad reflection upon our society. We from the community have lived in a state of fear, but I think we're about to, come out of it through measures like this. And we're appreciative. My parents are holding this sign, No Guantanamo at home or abroad. We're appreciative of the effort because Guantanamo existed in America. I can name you case after case. Fahad wasn't the first case. There's case of Uzair Paracha, Ahmed Abu Ali, the Hayat family in Lodi, California, the paintballing case, Imam Yassin Aref in Albany. You can look these cases up. There were frontline specials about them. What we have in the end is a systematic oppression of a people to scare them. And I thank efforts like this. I thank THAW, I thank Jean Theo Harris, I thank everyone here, Wallace Shawn, Kathleen Chalfant. I thank everyone here for their support, and it helps, encourages us, the family, to move forward. Thank you.
All right, so every movement needs a little bit of soul and a little bit of music. So we would like to go out, end our first broadcast with a little music from Gabby and Erica and Mahina Movement. So please welcome into the studio Mahina Movement. We will be back here next Monday and every Monday thereafter up until and throughout Fahad's trial, 6 to 7 o'clock, right here on this corner every Monday. www.thawaction.org for more information.
From me, and I thirst for the will to keep on fighting to be free.
I am the daughter of a bastard race, born out of rape and colonialism, the illegitimate child of Malinche y Cortés, abandoned, no home. Nací aquí, pero ni México ni América me quiere. Soy chicana, tejana, sprung from a land that was, is, and always will be Mexico. Caminando, pensando, caminando.
There's a wall inside my mind, and my mind is a place that is running out of time. 'Cause the roads are closing in. There are children with guns who've been trained to shoot me, and I've been on the run. Keep fighting to be free.
On which side of the border do I belong? I am too American for Mexico and too other for the United States. Made to feel like an alien in mi tierra, I am constantly reminded by the misrepresentations of history and within the fine print that we did not cross the border. The border crossed us. Caminando, cruzando, caminando.
Make it through another day. Inshallah, my family won't be taken away. Inshallah,
inshallah. My severed tongue shames me. allowing only broken thoughts and fragmented phrases to clumsily trickle out to my mouth. Miscommunications and misinterpretations of a language that was once mine. Mamá patiently teaching me un idioma que siempre va a ser la vida más fácil para mi hija. I am impotent, caminando, luchando, caminando.
There's a wall inside my heart, and my heart is my land, and my land is my home, and my home is everything I am. There are soldiers who kill and take my water from me, and I thirst for the will and keep on fighting to be free.
Soy la niña trabajando en los fields, moving from place to place in our big truck house. Wisconsin, Montana, Texas, desperately looking for a place to call home. Un lugar where my friends and teachers will know me for more than a couple of months. Playing on my tricycle and picking beets. Eating too many bananas and picking beets. Building our make-believe castles under our truck and picking beets. Me and my hermana Mary. Pasando el tiempo before Mama asks us to go back to work. Caminando, trabajando, caminando. Tratando de encontrar un espacio que es mío. Caminando, pensando, caminando. I am Latina, Mexicana,
Africa,
India, Americana, Chicana, US born and bred, Spanglish speaking, macaroni and carne asada, eating con sapos, giving, vato loving, traditionally radically born mestiza, chocolate skin, round hips and full breasts, corazón de azteca, ojos del maya, hija del sexto sol, loud for power and stimulating, West Side, Buena Vista, Harlem, Barrio Ruca, Loca, Esa Homes, viva la causa, la revolución, brown pride por vida way. I am the sun god Huitztepotli, Quetzalcoatl, Xochiquetzat, Tonantzin, Colicue, Frida, Zapata, all rolled into one. Órale, yo soy la nueva villa. Bing, bing, bing. We break things.
Mahina Movement. So let's take all the energy that we just saw come together on this corner tonight in this past hour and keep it going. Come back here next Monday. Bring 5 friends with you. Let's see this thing grow. And make sure that we are there in court when Fahad needs us. The next court date is October 30th at 10 a.m. www.thawaction.org, www.freefahad.com, www.educatorsforcivilliberties.org. All these sites have more information. There are some flyers being passed around. Again, this has been the first broadcast of Radio Free Fahad, and we will see you all in a week's time. Thank you for coming out.
Well, it's basically what used to happen in, poor countries that we dominated is now happening in our own country. I mean, I did a little traveling in Central America in the bad old days of the Reagan administration, and that was how people were being treated there. And, even torture was paid for by Americans, but not actually defended or hands-on practiced. So it's hard to believe that there are enough people in the justice system, judges and others, who are prepared to play with the Constitution in deference to the power of the state and the hysteria of the public, so that people are being, in effect, tortured right in our own city. Because I do think solitary confinement is a kind of attempt to break down the personality and drive someone mad. It's just like physical torture without blows.
I would love to be in those rooms where these decisions are being made and find out exactly how the mechanism works, whereby the attempt or dream of changing things is turned back. I'm not sure I understand how the mechanism works. Who is it who stands up and says, well, actually, we can't change it back? But that's what seems to be happening. There are very, very powerful forces running the country, and we don't know quite who they are. Obama doesn't run the country. It's not me, and it isn't you. And I'm not sure who it is. But, you know, it's a pretty bizarre moment. Very strange. I think it will be, you know, the year of 2009 will be remembered as a very odd period in which maybe the mask is being stripped off of, and we're realizing that this is not the democracy that we imagined. It's some kind of dictatorship, but we don't know who the dictator is. Usually dictators like to show off and march about wearing medals. But in our case, it's more mysterious.
And we're discovering more and more that they're the people who actually do like to stay behind the scenes. And I think after, for just between me and you, we're going to pull the curtain back and find out it's the bankers that are dictating
We'll see.
policy, but we shall see.
We'll
Anyways,
see.
thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Thank
You're
you.
awesome.